But I think we're going to see the iPad taking off more, particularly from a business point of view. People talk a lot about the consumerization of IT and companies allowing users to choose their own products, choose their own devices. And I think the iPad is going to be the device of choice. I've spoken to a lot of CIOs this year who have talked about trialling the iPad. So assuming that those trials are going to be successful and satisfactory, then we're going to see those organisations buying up lots of those devices and using them both for personal and business uses.
Well, I still think a lot of people aren't using virtualisation as much as they could. Cloud is still very much a buzzword. I've spoken to vendors who have said they actually avoid using the word cloud. It only confuses their customers.
So in terms of more general technologies, is location-aware technologies. I think we're reaching a sort of tipping point with smartphones now, so that people are much more attuned to broadcasting where they are. I mean, a year or two ago, when we talked about Google Latitude, people were very scared of broadcasting their location, and I think that now people are getting used to it in the context of things like Foursquare has got people used to saying, I'm in a location, are any of my friends here? And so that is now going to start leading on to other applications.
I was on a phone call recently interviewing the CIO, and I obviously won't mention the PR company or the CIO, but yeah, it was all going very well. But then towards the end of the interview, just as we were sort of saying our goodbyes and wrapping up, the PR person interrupted to pitch a new client to me, leaving their current CIO just hanging on the call, just waiting there while I went into this long involved pitch, leaving me feeling awkward as well, thinking I should be interrupting to say, no, I've got to say goodbye to the CIO and thank him. So he just had to sit through this 5-minute pitch, and then eventually we said, okay, well, thanks for your time then, bye. And yeah, so I don't imagine he'll be renewing the contract with them.
Solwise picked up the account for the iPlate. You know that little socket you can put into the wall from BT that said you'll get an extra at least 0.5 megabits a second on your broadband if you install it. They sent a press release that actually said, I will actually quote this because it's a great headline, Solwise is finally stocking the iPlate for ADSL users, but are actively encouraging customers not to buy it.
I think my favourite of the past year was probably the Vodafone Twitter page. You know, somebody leaving the corporate Twitter account open, and then somebody broadcasting some sort of homophobic comments on there.
Probably the nature of communication, the way in which the communication rolls between the three groups is probably the one which will change. I think probably social media is becoming more key and more important. The fact that you can contact people anywhere, anytime, and let people know what you're doing. So things like probably Facebook and Twitter, people communicating that way, building networks that way, I think is probably going to be the trend that's come up more this year and will continue through to next year as well.
Horizon, I guess, is Twitter. Although, in many ways, I wouldn't say that's been as revolutionary as some people are saying. You
know, what annoys me more than anything is seeing a press release come through and it's embargoed for 1 week from now. For example, I went into one of the large international PR agencies this week, and they've just hired a guy who wrote for a national broadsheet newspaper in the UK, and they've given him a director's role and pretty much told him to invent his own job. He's sort of sitting somewhere between press and PR, and there's this ground in the middle. And he said to me, a good example is something like Manchester United Television. You know, it's their own content, it's promoting their own product, but there's a lot of people out there who will consume that kind of content.
Possibly, yeah. I think because it's now easier for people to contact one another and work more closely together without needing formal lines of communication, or without even needing to meet face to face all that often.
But the way that the media is now set up, there's a definite case where you've got thousands of companies here, dozens of publications. Now the cross connections between those is massive. Even if every firm could afford their own little private PR, there's no way we could deal with all the telephone calls back and forth. So a layer of PR in the middle makes absolute sense.